Yeah, we're doing the thing. I
Yes, we've been recording a podcast over the last maybe like 6 months.
feel like
And
it's been
then
longer. I think it's been
yeah,
longer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is mostly us getting together and just talking through different things going on around conflict and abolition and what's happening in the world, what's happening locally.
Yeah, yeah, and like dreams and hopes about how to handle conflict better, and specifically, I think, at least for me, just related to how we move forward in the world, as community in these times, what are we going to do to survive and thrive together?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know, this felt just like this timely moment of like, let's just put this out here, like no edits, no anything, because this past week has had like a real intense level of conflict, and not between the us and them, right? But
hmm
like the us, quote
hmm
unquote.
hmm
Um, yeah, and it's just felt really important to just like jump in and respond.
hmm Yeah. And I know we've talked before about different ways that movements in the past have been stalled or fractured by conflict. I know you've seen that a lot in the work you do as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've seen it. I feel like there's like 11 books out there now written about like this is what went wrong in the movement, you know?
hmm
Um, and without just saying a whole bunch of, catchphrases about what it is, like I think there's, purity in a movement, in this, quote unquote leftist movement of, an expectation of exactly how every person is supposed to behave.
hmm
That's not necessarily tied in values, but more in performance,
hmm
more in this like outward presentation. And I mean, just jumping right into it, like, I mean, not dancing around it. I felt a lot of frustration, and I feel this when it happens a lot, but this frustration around this strike, right? This 1 day strike. Um, not just because I've been involved in like union organizing before, and so like I understand that like to have a successful strike, there needs to be strategy, the members need to be involved, there needs to be strike funds, there need to be supports, all these things. Um, but it also like 1 day isn't really that powerful because if the strike is on Friday, it means that like on Thursday and Saturday people are going to shop. This strike is very interesting because it was organizing local businesses to close, telling folks not to go to work, and there was no support for individuals who like couldn't go to work. There was no support for people who might get paid on Friday and needed to purchase things that day. And what was really confusing to me was this pressure for the local small businesses to close
hmm
versus let's pull all of our money away from the larger businesses.
hmm
And so that's what was really starting this for me was like first and foremost, like what is this and why is this happening?
Yeah, I had a similar response as reaction as someone who used to have a small business, a local food business. We employed local folks. We, did our best to like actually not pay tipped worker wages. We paid wages, and people still got tips. Like we did our best to work within the system, but it's pretty difficult. I mean, it's like a lot of these industries, I mean, particularly when I think about like cafes or restaurants, like we rely on people who are actually like paid under the table. We rely on people who are not paid a living wage. And even still, like it's not really super profitable. So like the owners of small shops like that generally are not making much money. And so then to have to like,
Mhm.
what I was thinking about myself, I was like, if we were at that time when I had that business expected to either we have to close, that's the only way we're sort of in solidarity with this, or we're going to be, maybe like ostracized or canceled or whatever. How are we going to pay ourselves? How are we going to make sure our bills are paid? How are we going to pay our people who are now out of work? Like that, it doesn't really totally make sense to me. I love like for people who can do it, if that makes sense, okay, but it just doesn't really make
Yeah.
sense to me. Even though I'm behind, like we need a general strike, and I'm behind that
Yeah.
philosophically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the question of like, what is the general strike and what's the point of it? Right? Like
Mhm.
when I think about, the places that are funding the politicians and that are funding ICE and police and, all of these terrible, horrible things. Um, those aren't the local folks in our community for the most part,
Mhm.
right? You know?
Mhm.
Um, and so the concept that, of them shutting down or that the individual is supposed to suffer, um, it doesn't seem strategic to actually help us reach the goal. Like, what is the goal?
Mhm.
The goal is to like defund these things, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't seem strategic. And I see a lot of shame thrown around to a lot of people, and not just in this particular case, but
Mhm.
specifically in this case, like if you're not willing to miss work, if you're not willing to close your shop down, like this is a huge issue. Like you're a terrible person. You're supporting ICE, yada yada yada. Now, I will say, I stood on the picket line with the Starbucks workers a few weeks ago, and there were people who were like rolling into Starbucks, like I stand with you, and then getting their coffee. And I was like, y'all, if we can't like not get coffee from a place where like the union is strategically picketing, like we're doomed. I literally said we're doomed, right? And I feel like this is different. Like that is a strategic group of people who are saying, don't shop at this place. In fact, go to the local place because the CEO of Starbucks made 6,666 times more than the median worker of Starbucks. Like that is, don't go there. But this
Yes, it's
concept
criminal.
of, don't pay your bills, don't feed yourself, don't, and obviously you're not down
Mhm.
is a huge issue, and
Mhm.
specifically, and power to the organizing. Like I want to shout out, there was organizing behind the scenes that happened to pull together a whole bunch of like Kingston businesses, which I
Mhm.
thought was very, very powerful. Like folks taking stances, some businesses shutting down, and again, it can be very performative because I
Mhm.
know some folks in there, some businesses that were in there that shut down, have the ability and the capability and the privilege to shut down, but on a day-to-day basis are, their values are not aligned with, they're the same ones who are like, vote blue no matter who, and so when I started seeing attacks on businesses that were refusing to close, I was like, well, wait a minute. Like in my brain, I was like, this is why the left ain't going anything. Like I was like, this is why like we
Mhm.
can't do this.
Mhm.
Um, because like we're talking about people and small businesses in our small community. And
Mhm.
why is this one day performative action more important than, somebody saying honestly, like, this isn't an option for us.
Mhm. Yeah, and this came up for me even because I had tickets to a concert that was on Friday, the day of the strike. And I was like, okay, so did the band say anything? Did the venue say anything? And if they didn't say anything, well, if they did, would it just be performative? And I don't like now I'm like, who am I investing? I know this is like a queer band and whatever, and I'm like, how at what point does it become really, like you said, just performative so that we put up a sign that says, as you spoke to, putting up the Black Lives Matter signs or putting a watermelon in your Instagram profile or, whatever. But then, like, what are you actually doing day to day to make change? And when you talk about like the goal of this movement, or the strike, um, I was thinking, what was the goal? Like,
Thank you for that important
I,
distinction, by the way.
I
Strike movement.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and then I guess you said it like it's to defund ICE, I think, but like how? Yeah, like I just it's when you were speaking earlier, and I'm curious because I don't have direct experience with unions. Um, I feel like unions they organize in advance, and then being very clear about their like what they want, what their demands are. And it's like if you don't do this, we are going to then strike.
Yeah.
Um, is that am I getting that correct?
Yeah.
And I and
Yeah.
I feel so I feel like with this strike, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't feel like yes, we're posting online, right? Like I get that. We're posting ICE out, fuck ICE, abolish ICE. I get that. And I don't quite see the full organization. I'm not trying to critique I'm not trying to over critique and then be like, you're doing it wrong, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like, you posted on about this. What are we doing after this? What are we doing next?
Yeah.
Can this be a thing that we are actually building towards something that is more, that is meaningful, that is actually organized,
Yeah.
that is going to be impactful?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really so I mean I've been organizing since middle school, right? But like I always say like my Midwest Academy, organizing guide, I'm always like, where's the strategy chart? Like what's our long-term goal, our intermediate goal, our short-term goal, right? Who has the power to give us what we need, right? There's no point in going, and talking to the mayor if it has to do with this funding, like and in these sorts of situations, right? Like switching the target and saying, okay, small business bad for not doing this thing. At the end of the day, how directly is the small business impacting this ICE funding? You know, because the people who are voting for that funding, and even though he recently voted against it, so everyone's like, look at him go, and it's like, no, they only vote against things when they know. But like Pat Ryan, has been celebrating ICE, thanking ICE, even as a Democrat, like, and he has that power, and the people who give him money have that power.
Hmm.
And I see, I mean, if we're gonna if we're gonna go back, like the moment that Kamala announced that she was like running, people are like, "I'm with her," and I'm like, "Well, wait a minute, like, what is she fighting for?" Because like
Mm,
organizing is about pushing our power over the
mm,
person who has the power to give us what we want, right? And in that moment, that's where we held the most power, right? Was to say like, okay, well, I'm not going to vote for you unless you do this, but she didn't have to do
mm,
any of that because we just said, I'm with you, right?
mm,
And so it doesn't seem like a strategic way to actually move things forward. And it feels like a feel good way, but not a strategic way, you know? Because, like, again, like, if we're thinking about, the millions of dollars, that the big businesses contribute towards Trump and contribute towards all this, other work, pulling money away from them is what's important. Pulling money away
mm,
from Starbucks is what's important. If our local
mm,
coffee shop is closed and someone doesn't really care that much, they went to Starbucks, like,
mhm,
you know, that
mhm,
they went to Hannaford to get their baked goods because, a little bakery closed or whatever, and it's just like,
mhm.
it didn't seem, there was no clear line. And I think the last thing I'll just say on this is just over the past 10 years, and I'm not even talking about before that, but just 10 years, the amount of like unprecedented marches where lots of people just show up in the streets and do all these things, and it's like, whoa, all these people, change must be coming, and then it doesn't,
Yeah.
like this tactic is not one that's moving forward, just showing up in the streets without a strategic plan to take money away, to actually use our power.
Yeah, as someone who's been to a lot of those in the past, it's like you said it yourself, like it's a feel good. It's like it's a great way to like sort of come together and be, this energy and like channel that in a direction in that moment. And then, yeah, it is then what happens next. There's already um, organized calls for boycotts for anyone who's funding or profiting off of ICE, all these major companies. Um, and yet, yeah, it does seem to miss the mark when you start boycotting or canceling or whatever, targeting your local whatever store, your small business, that maybe is doing good things, like you said, maybe is, maybe isn't, but some of which are doing good things in the community, but have regardless, really no connection to ICE funding. So,
Yeah.
I know myself, I'm like, okay, I've been saying this to you, I'm like, I'm looking for direction. People need sort of direction. And I think that's part of what happens here is you see a post online, you're like, okay, general strike, great. Okay, cool. Now that's a direction. That's a place that I can sort of target all of this anxiety, like I was talking about before we hit record, all of this energy, all this anger. Um, and I've been on these different calls in the last week or two, hearing from different, more like national organizations about ideas they have or actions they're calling people to do. And some of it's the same, some of it's different. Do you have any thoughts on like what locally people could be doing to be supporting, to be
Mm.
doing something like more meaningful, whether you mean locally in Kingston or just sort of just broadly in general, like,
Yeah. I mean, so I will say first and foremost, we talk about this a lot that like everyone has different roles in the revolution, right? Like
mm-hmm,
I don't want to say like if you don't do X, you're not in it, right? If you don't do X, you're
mm-hmm,
not like that's not because like people need to cook the food, watch the kids, do the trainings, do the healing, like if I didn't have an acupuncturist that was like supporting me on a sliding scale, like I wouldn't be doing half of what I'm doing, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um and for years I got free massages from someone who was like, you are doing all this work, part of my work is making sure you have, um and so like I want to say that, but like I think that strategy is very, very important. Being strategic and intentional about why are you doing what you're doing,
mm-hmm,
and how is it actually going to get you closer to what you're doing. um and I talk a lot about being aware of like how much time you have and like not burning yourself out, but it's like what are the like are you going to show up to things, are you going to volunteer at things, are you going to you know be the strategy planner of things, like this like level of different ways you could be involved, but just being intentional about what it is,
mm-hmm,
and how it's moving you closer and not just like running yourself ragged for no reason. But I think moving towards more strategic plans, like even the BDS movement, right? The BDS movement, boycott, divest, sanction, pulling away from, things that are supporting Israel, they have categories of like, these are priority boycott targets. These are pressure targets. These are also horrible places, but like to make an impact, you've got to like pull away from these particular things. Um, and so being strategic about let's all not go here. Like this Target strike right now around, what they were doing with DEI, they've lost so much money, and it's
mm-hmm,
like so impressive, right?
mm-hmm,
And a lot of people that are still shopping at Target, are folks who don't have time to go to 15 different stores,
mm-hmm,
because they work too much,
yeah,
and or they can't, pay the difference between like that Target cost and that someplace else cost, right? And so
mm-hmm,
strategically, you know, creating infrastructure to support people to not shop at those places feels
mm-hmm,
really, really important instead of
mm-hmm,
shaming people for shopping at those places.
mm-hmm,
Like this thrifting thing is so huge right now, and I'm like, yeah, I've been like driving around to all different thrift stores over the past month trying to find a specific piece of like furniture to fit a specific hole that I need, and like the number of times that I've gone onto like Amazon and been like, oh, it's right there, I could get it, oh my God, but but I have the privilege to take that time to do this, And so
Hmm.
we actually have to create the systems to support our whole community in taking those steps. Because if
Hmm.
only the wealthy are able to come off Amazon, if only the wealthy are able to shop at the local places, like chicken is 99 cents a pound over a Hannaford some days. Like, and I really want to go to my local butcher,
Hmm.
and sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't, you know, but it's like, what is that difference of, you know, who's going to help fill that gap for me so I can get good
Hmm.
food at the local place, keep the money local without it hurting me? So I think that
Hmm.
that's part of the strategic systems that need to be built up to ensure that we actually can move towards some sort of strike because and again, I feel like I'm rambling, but I will just say this because I spoke at the African Roots Center the other day about the Montgomery bus boycott and Martin Luther King Jr. like right after everyone voted, he was like, "Yes, this is going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. We're not going to get on the buses, but there's cars, there's gas. My car's in it. Like don't worry about using as much gas as you need. Get yourself around. We got the taxi cabs. We got like it was like here's the alternative to the thing so you can still do what you need to do. We're strategically boycotting this bus and we've given you ways to make it happen, right?
Hmm.
And so like if you had just been like we're boycotting the bus, you're screwed. That wouldn't have been as successful.
Yeah, this brings me to the way I'm often thinking on that individual level. It's probably like the therapist brain being on, but um I'm thinking about the discomfort, being with discomfort of sharing resources that maybe we're not folks who have are not used to sharing. Thinking about some of the ways I've tried to practice that more and more, particularly over the past year, of like sharing rides or offering places to stay to people I'm not super close to. And normally like wouldn't be inviting into my home because of my own trauma about what home is like and having safety and wanting to protect that and having to sit with the discomfort and work through those feelings that come up and arise so that I can show up more in the way of how I want to be in the world and not just again posting about it online or not just saying um saying solidarity but like what does that actually look like in action because if we are to really do like a general strike nationally or some major movement we are going to have to share resources. I'm getting video bombed by my nephew right now. He's just walked into the door, walked into the room. We're going to have to be comfortable with sharing resources that we're not used to sharing for those of us who have those resources that could be shared.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, myself included, have been, whether it's from your past or whatever, it's like taught scarcity and the ways that our economy is manipulated and our society and our politics are manipulated and have been. There's just like so much sense of scarcity, and yet
Mm,
there's not as much like there's so much available. I think we were just
mm,
talking the other day about like there's enough food to feed everybody, right? Like there is actually so much
yeah.
available. We have to be willing to sit with that discomfort, sit with those feelings of like, is this a thing that I can really give away? And if I give this away, or if I share this, or if I open up this space to somebody, what does that mean? What does that mean to me? What does that feel like in my body? And how can I actually settle with that? Because it might
Yeah.
feel really powerful and really generative
Yeah.
and really expansive, which is what I have found.
Yeah.
It's a practice, though. I'm not trying to say I've gotten it all down. It's just a practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there's risk involved, right? This like,
Mhm.
let's share a lawnmower, but what if you break it? Or like, I'll give you a ride, but what if, this happens or that, like there's this fear of but what if something breaks? Or, I mean, even like, what if you sue me? Like like all these things that pop up.
Yes, I was just saying
Yeah.
this the other day when we had the snowstorm, and I'm like, because the something I'm learning from folks in Minnesota, what they're doing there is I'm like, oh, we have to organize on a fucking block by block level. Okay, how can I get even
Yeah.
closer with my neighbors? How can I show up in action? So I'm out there shoveling. We had this big ass snowstorm, and I'm brushing with my car, and I'm like, I'm just gonna brush off my neighbors' cars, and so I start, and then I'm like, what if the wiper breaks? And then all of a sudden, and it's just like it, yes, absolutely. That whole fear came up for me. Like, what if they're like, you dumped all the snow on the side of my car though, and now I have to shovel more to get it out. And they're
Yeah.
pissed off at me, like, where I live. It's all of that again, scarcity, that fear of the unknown, the threat of like even I think that people have of like, you touch my shit, like you touch my stuff, like how did you do it?
Yeah.
I even felt that in my body come up as I like started brushing off one of my neighbor's cars. I'm like, oh, I'm touching somebody's stuff. Like, why does this feel so weird? It feels so weird because
Hmm.
we're like really not like it's which the individual, the like material, the um that's mine and that's yours, and don't touch mine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just so in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much fear, around like even wanting to have a like I'd rather avoid having to have a conversation about, not me specifically. I mean, sometimes yes, but like for the most part I try to lean into it. But I think like the royal we, like there's so much um I would rather not have to talk to you about whether or not I accidentally broke something. Like, so I'm not going to take the risk, right? Like I'm not
Uh-huh.
going to do the thing.
Yep.
Um and so yeah, like that community space, because and I mean, where I live now, this is the long I've lived here for almost 6 years. This is the longest I've ever lived anywhere since I like moved out of my mom's house when I was 16 years old, right? Like I've just moved all around. And like
Mm.
I know my neighbors. And some of them I hang out with, some of them I don't, but I know them, right? And so like power goes out, we're talking to each other from the end of the street. Like, the neighbor came over to tell me about the bear, like we're supporting each other in like all these different
Yeah.
ways because we know each other.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that is part of this space. But like, when you're asking about the strategic and the support, of, like how do we actually move towards, some sort of general strike or, whatever the case may be, like there's a piece about asking for help that can also be hard, right? Like
Yeah.
to put out there, like, hey, I really want to shop at the local place, but it's a lot cheaper for me to get it at Walmart, with someone help support, right?
Mhm.
And And I think that like our hatred, I want to say, is hatred the right word? I'm going to say disgust, right? Society's disgust at poor people makes it very, very easy to shame somebody who's shopping at Amazon. Like, oh, you don't really care, but not check themselves when they're like, well, wait a minute, like PACs associated with Southwest Airlines donated $250,000 towards Donald Trump. Let me not fly. Like if we go to opensecrets.org and we look at like who contributed, like, oh, but you went on American Airlines to your little like, vacation thing and Delta and all
Yeah.
these places. Like, so you're allowed to, like, wealthier folks can make decisions that are impacting, that are putting money into corporations that are funding these horrible things. But when poor people are, working class folks are like, I don't have the ability. Like, I worked so many hours. I got my kids. My car broke down. I'm going to have Amazon deliver this to me for free to my door. And I'm a
Mhm.
bad person because I won't strike. So I
Mhm.
think that we need to really be looking at where we're putting our dollars and have everyone be looking at where we're putting our dollars and be willing to have the conversation versus saying, you're bad because XYZ. Like, we're all doing our best in late stage capitalism,
Mhm.
and we need to be strategic about how to move forward so we can all be better. Like
Mhm.
we need to lift as we climb. We need
Mhm.
to what's that saying? I'm like, like the as the tide rises, like all ships rise, like that sort of thing. Like we need to do this as a community,
Yeah.
not individually.
Mm. Wow. Yes. Absolutely.
That.
That's a big lift, but I love it. I'm here for it.
Anything you want to say before we said we weren't gonna go too long? I don't even know how long we've been going, but
Um, I just want to say I appreciate you. We've gotten together for like the last year having these conversations, and um, it's helpful to be just talking about it. It's not about like being right, but it's helpful to just be, I found like in conversation about this, it helps me pause and think. And ultimately, like I said, it's a practice, and I'm trying to think differently and act differently.
mm,
And just be, again, acting in ways as best I can that are more and more aligned with the ways I want to be showing up in the world and with my values. And our conversations are a part of
mm,
helping me do that. So thank you.
mm. Ditto. It is
Yeah.
practice. It's about conversation. It's about feeling safe to, talk about like, am I wrong? Am I right? Like what's a good way to do this? Like what's the situation versus just, this black and white thinking.
Right.
Because yeah, we need to look at all the gray, um, and everything that everyone's just doing to survive and come together so that we can, yeah, move forward in a smarter way, in a long, sustainable way, in a strategic way. So yeah, so
Oh
grateful
yeah.
for you.
Thank you.